Hi, this is Rachelle from Rivet Patterns, and in this video we are going to be talking about a V-neck. This is a classic V-neck you'll find in a lot of different tees. We are going to be doing it so that the seam of the neckband hits right at the center. There are other ways to do it where you can overlap that, but we'll address that in a different video. So I've got my neckband here. You can see I've marked the triangle. In this pattern, this is the rhubarb raglan. The part of the pattern that has the V on it, you don't cut it out yet, you just mark it. It makes it a lot easier to sew this part of it later. So what we're going to start with here is the center of your V, and it's kind of hard to see because I use the same fabric here. Let me put a piece of paper behind it. Okay, see right where this V comes to a point, you're going to make a mark. I'm using a chalk. These are Madame So. Clover makes it too. I love these things. They're accurate and they work. So we're going to make a mark so we know where the center of the V is. If you do use these, make sure that you check it first on your fabric to make sure it comes out. Okay, so now I'm going to take this over to my regular sewing machine, and I am going to stitch using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, about 1 inch, because that's going to come down here. I'm going to put my presser foot down, put my needle down, presser foot up, and then come back up here about 1 inch. All right, so you can see the V that I made here. And this is just to hold, this is like a stay stitch to keep our V steady when we're attaching that front of the V-neck. So next, we are going to make a small snip right at that line. You're going to snip 2, but not through these stitches. Okay? If you snip through them, you're going to have to make some alterations to make this work. Okay? See? Like that. All right. Next, we're going to bring up the neckband itself here. I'll just do it on top here so you can see it. I memory press my neckbands. I always do this. I just find it much easier in the end to fold them in half. So you're going to bring your 2 ends together, your 2 short ends, and this is wrong sides together. Okay? Using your regular machine with a regular stitch and matching thread, you're going to sew this part of the neckband. Sometimes some machines can have a hard time starting here. You might want to start in the middle and move out. Depends on your machine. But go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back. All right, it's kind of hard to see because I used matching thread, but I have now sewn this part. So next, we're going to trim this because we don't need the center part. We need to take it out. So we're going to trim the inside of this to 1/4 inch-ish. And try to get that center. It's kind of hard to do with these large scissors. Okay. So we're going to take that out, and then we're going to make the same snip that we did here, but we're going to snip same thing right up to the stitches, but not through them. This makes it so we can move this apart and we can move this apart so that we can put our opposite V's together, because that's the trickiest part. All right, so next you're going to want to, I'm going to pull out for this a bit, get a little more. Okay, so it's easiest now to go ahead and open up your seam allowances here and give them a good press. It will help the neckline or the neckband lay a lot flatter when we put it together. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So these are pressed open now, and if you didn't make a memory press, you'll have pressed the rest of your neckband as well. So now when you bring the 2 V points together, you're going to get a nice V here. Okay? All right. So now, moving on, we are going to quarter and pin our neckline. So the very first, this is where all your quarter marks are going to come from. Okay? So I'll find the end here, pin, and then we're going to bring this down to the center of the V, like this. We're going to pin. You can use clips if you want. I just find that pins are more accurate in this part I usually don't use pins, but for this neckline, I'm going to. Okay, so you've got that quartered, set that aside. And now you're going to do the same thing for the raglan. If I were, I used an old jersey sheet, which in hindsight was not the best for tutorials because it rolls like crazy, but we're going to make do with it. So again, the V is your first pin mark. Then you're going to find the center back. Okay. And then using that, you'll match up your center front and your center back. And then find quarter mark at each of the sleeve caps. And then we'll be ready to start attaching our band. Okay. So for right now, we're going to ignore the quarter marks. They come in handy right when we're about ready to put the whole neckband on. Right now, we're going to focus right in the front again because we need to get this V nice and crisp. So what you're going to do is you're going to match the V here to the V here, right? So it's going to come in and line up like this. If you are fairly confident doing this, you can do both of these layers at a time. It's a trick to only use one because you can actually see exactly where the seam allowance lies in relation to your V. So I'm going to do it that way just to show you. So you're going to go ahead and push a pin right here in the middle, right on that seam line, right? So when it's under, it's supposed to be lined up. Okay. Now what you're going to do is you're going to turn the whole thing. This is where that split's going to come in really handy. See? That's where that V comes in. Okay, turn the entire thing. Place another pin here. Okay. And then do it the other direction. That's why these clips are into the fabric are super important, to be able to manipulate this properly so that it lays flat when you sew it. Okay? And I do it this way because I'm going to start sewing this way. So I do this part last so it's ready for me to go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to my machine. I'm going to stitch down here until I get to right here at this point. Put my needle down, press your foot up, move all of my fabric and manipulate it back around so that I can then sew this part. And I'm going to baste this. You might be tempted not to, but baste it because it's so easy to pull basting stitches if it's not exactly where you want it. Okay, to show you how this is done. So I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance again. And this is just a regular basting stitch. We're not doing anything fancy right now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully stitch all the way down until I hit the very center, like that. Okay? my needle down, pull up my presser foot, pull this pin, and you're going to turn all of your fabric, your bodice and your neckband. You're going to pivot it so that it's straight under. Okay, make sure that you've got all your pieces lined up. This is the fiddly part, obviously. Okay. Then, when you're all ready and you've got everything lined up, put your foot down, and you're going to stitch back up the other side, about the same amount. And then, I'm going to pull it out, and we're going to check our work and see if we like this or not, which is always the moment of truth. I gotta tell you, in the many, many years I've been sewing, it's so very rare that I get this right on the first shot. And I didn't, so try again. I'd say third time is a charm, but this one took me 4 tries. Not ashamed, this is how long it took, but do take my advice when I say if you are a beginner at this, don't use fiddly fabric, because it makes everything way harder. So anyway, now that we've got this, you can see that my center V is nice and in line with my center mark, and there's this little puckering will go away once it's top stitched and you've pressed, but you don't want any part of it pinched. That's why we have to get the stitches as close to that snip as we can while still anchoring them, and also why it's easier to use one layer at a time. So now that I have that done, I'm going to go ahead and baste the other layer to this so that I have this part of my neckband. And you don't have to do it along the same lines. You can just baste it within the seam allowance. It doesn't really matter. So then we can go and do our pinning and quartering. So to go ahead and pin and quarter, I mean, you've done this probably a million times with your round neckbands. It's the exact same. Okay. I match up our raw edges and match up our pins and repin. This is where I'm going to switch to clips because I'm going to use a serger. I do not want to accidentally serge over a pin. Done that. It's not cool. And then once you are ready to sew, you can use your serger or you can use your regular machine with a stretch stitch. It's up to you. The way you're going to do this is you're going to start here at this V. And you're going to serge around, stretching the neckband, not the neckline, all the way around, and then you'll finish right here at the other V. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and go do that. Now that I've serged all the way around, or use your regular machine, so you can see this is a nice point here on the correct side also. Nice point. You can see some of my basting stitches are still here, so I'm going to go ahead and pull those and then take off the chalk mark, hopefully. And then I am going to give my neckband a very good press all the way around, press the seam allowance down. And there we go, all nice and pressed. When the water stained, my iron was a little over steamy and leaking. So the last step you're going to do is you're going to top stitch this. I know you'll be tempted to skip that, but I strongly recommend you do, mostly because this point right here has very little fabric right at the point on the other side. Remember, we were just a tiny bit just so we could get it flipped. By top stitching this, you lend extra stability right here, so you're unlikely to develop a little hole here. So you'll start this, do the same way. Or if you're using your regular machine and a straight stitch or a straight stretch stitch like a lightning bolt, you can start wherever you want, and then when you get to the center, put your needle down, press your foot up, flip, and keep going. Same if you are using a single chain
stitch on a cover stitch. If you're using a twin needle or a twin cover stitch, if you're doing 2 lines of it, the easiest way I've found is to start just a little bit over here and go all the way around and then cross over again. Then it's really, really easy to just gently seam rip out so that they come together at exact point. And then you can take whatever, if you're using a cover stitch, you know you'll have top threads. You can use a little hand needle to thread them very directly back to the other side, tie them in a knot, and then snip them. So I'm going to go ahead and do that next.
And there it is, all top stitched and pressed. You can see how I did right here with the 2 needles coming together. And now I'm ready to wear it. And there's, yep, hi kitty kitty. Thank you for joining us and enjoy your V-neck.